Hi, this is Jenny Baldwin, and I am going to begin the 6-week series on fraction small groups. And this week, we are paving the road to success on fraction equivalence. So make sure you've already watched the story on working with fractions because a lot of things that we're talking about today in class deal with that story. Today, we're going to focus on equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions. Next week, in your live class, you'll talk about comparing fractions, then you'll head into mixed numbers and improper fractions. You'll then begin to compute with mixed numbers and fractions by adding and subtracting. We'll talk about decomposing fractions throughout these lessons, and we're also going to learn how to multiply fractions. You may be wondering, what is a fraction? Well, a fraction is a number. As you can see, we have a group of pencils, and it says what fraction of the pencils is blue. Well, I can see that 2 are blue, but we have to think about the entire set. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 of the 5 pencils are blue, or 2/5 are blue. Now we can look at this fraction right here. I can see that 1 of the 4 pieces is shaded, or 1/4. What if I drew a line and divided this piece into different sizes? Now I have 2 of the 8 pieces are shaded. 2/8 is the same or equivalent to 1/4. Now let's look at this number line. You can see that I have a 0 as an endpoint and a 1 as an endpoint. My number line is divided into 8 pieces. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These 8 pieces are the same size. They're 8 equal pieces. Here is 1 of the 8, and this is a number. We're representing fractions on a number line just like we would any other number. Here's 3/8, here's 7/8. Right here in the middle would be 4 of the 8, or 4/8. You can also see that because this is the middle, I could also say it is 1/2. There are more than one way to show the same amount. Now let's look at the number 1. That's the whole. I would have 8 of the 8. When I have 8 of the 8, I am saying that I have the same as 1. 8/8 equals 1. So now let's explore a few manipulatives. So I'm going to turn on my document camera so we can see fractions in action. Let's say that I have a candy bar just like this, and I am going to let you have 1/2 of the candy bar. And then I'll say you can have 1/2, and I'm also going to have a half of a candy bar. But what if my candy bar was like this? It's a lot bigger. Is my 1/2 the same as your 1/2? No, it isn't, because we're not talking about the same size whole. When we talk about the same size, when we talk about equivalent fractions and comparing fractions, we have to talk about the same size whole. So if we were to draw number lines to find equivalent fractions or to compare fractions, our number lines would need to be the same size. So here is 1/2. And here's my endpoints, and here's the other endpoint. If I was to divide the other number line into smaller increments and divided it into 4 pieces, I can see that 1/2 and 2/4 are the same size. So let's look at the candy bars again. Let's divide the candy bar into 4 pieces. Here's 1/2, and you can see that 2/4 is the same as 1/2. Now let's explore a few other manipulatives and concepts. We are going to talk about building fractions in different ways. Now before we do that, I want to point out something that was in the story and that we're going to be using a lot as we find equivalent fractions and as we build fractions and as we simplify fractions. Now remember that fractions are numbers. And if we have a fraction that is equal to 1, that simply means that the numerator and the denominator are the same. 2 over 2 is the same as 1. So let's look at these fraction circles here. I have one whole circle. Now you may not have some of these same manipulatives at your house, but what you can do is get construction paper or colored paper or even white paper, trace a circle onto a piece of paper. You can use a plate or a cup, or you could use paper plates, you could use coffee filters, you could use anything to make circles. You can see that this circle that I have here is one whole, which is the same as 2 halves. 2 of the 2 is the same as 1 whole. So let's explore a little bit more, and I'm going to get some more fractions and layer them here. So what if I take away 1 half? And now I have 6 underneath. What we want to discover is how many sixths does it take to be 1 half? So if I started off with 1 half, you can see that there's 1, 2, 3 sixths. 1 half is the same as 3 sixths. Now also pay attention. What happened when I only had 2 pieces? My pieces were large. But when my denominator got bigger and turned into a 6 and I have 6 pieces, my pieces got smaller. The same thing is going to happen. And let's take away 3 of these 6, or 1 half, and let's look at twelfths. How many twelfths will we have? And as you can see, from 6 to 12, what happened? My pieces got smaller and smaller. It takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 twelfths. All of these representations are equivalent. 1 half is the same as 3 sixths and is the same as 6 twelfths. They all are equal fractions. So let's head back to our manipulatives here, and it says let's build 1/4 in 2 different ways. And what I'm going to do is get out some pieces of fraction circles that have been cut. So I have my 1/4. I also have my 1/8 pieces, and I also have twelfths. And so what we want to do is build equivalent fractions that are the same as 1/4. So we need to figure out how many 8ths and 12ths it will take. So let's first use our 8ths, and we'll layer them on top. I can see that 1/4 is the same as 2 8ths. So to build 1/4 with 2 8ths, I did 1/8 plus 1/8 equals 2 8ths. 1/4 and 2 8ths are equivalent. They are the same. So now let's try the same thing, but this time we're going to use twelfths. I'll lay 3 twelfths on top, and you can see they are all the same size in the end. So it took 3 twelfths to equal 1/4. 1/12 plus 1/12 plus 1/12 equals 3 twelfths. That is the same as 1/4. Now, when we think back to our units of 1, what I want you to realize is if we didn't have fraction circles, how could we have found out that these were equivalent? What could we use to find that out? So what I'm going to do is get a clean sheet of paper, and I know that we have 1/4. But as we did earlier, we want it to be 8ths. We know that we want our end fraction to have an 1/8 as a denominator. Now, if we multiply something by 1, we're going to end up with the same amount, just like 4 times 1 equals 4, right? So, if we think back, remember if we have the same numerator and denominator that's the same as 1, what times 4 equals 8? I know that 4 times 2 equals 8. So my numerator and denominator need to be the same thing. 1 times 2 is 2. And as we determined earlier, 2 8ths is the same as 1/4. I simply had multiplied by 2. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about how to simplify. You can see this one's smaller, and so we would actually do the opposite, and we would divide by 2 over 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So we can compare fractions and simplify fractions, and we can find equivalent fractions by simply using a fraction equivalent to 1. Let's do the same thing with twelfths. We know we want 1/4, and we know that we want twelfths. So how many twelfths is it going to take? So let's multiply by the equivalent of 1. 4 times what is 12? I know 4 times 3. 1 times 3. So 3/12 would be my answer. Now, let's go back to simplifying fractions. I am going to pull out some little cards, and we want to find an equivalent fraction, but let's say that we don't have any manipulatives. We simply need to go based on our knowledge of numbers. So, let's pull that back up again. We have 3/9, and when I have 3/9, if we want to simplify this fraction, we need to divide by a fraction that is equal to 1. But we need to think about common factors. What does this 3/9, what do 3 and 9 have as common factors? Now factors, if you think about it, we learned about that in your regular class. Factors are the multiplication facts. What times what equals this number? Well, I always know that the number 1 times this is always going to equal 3. There's nothing else that equals 3. So 1 times 3 are the only factors. For 9, I know that 1 times 9 equals 9. And I also know 3 times 3 equal 9. So those are my factors. Let's look. They have something in common. They both have a 3. I can divide by a 3 over 3, which is the same as 1, and I can get 1/3. 1/3 is the same as 3/9. They are equivalent. So let's try a different one. This time, let's look at 6/15. And let's first find the factors of 6 and 15. We can build a factor rainbow. I know that 1 times 6 is 6, because I have my 1 and the number itself, and I also know that 2 times 3 is 6. So those are my factors. For 15, I'm going to have my 1 and 15. I know that 2 isn't divisible into 15, but I know that 3 and 5 are, and there's nothing else because 4 will not go into 15 either. Again, we can see that there's something in common. So I am going to divide by 1, or 3 over 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 2/5 is equivalent to 6/15. Now, let's stop this for a second, and we're going to head to the internet because I want to explore some other resources that you have available to you to learn all about fractions. So here are some of the resources that are also in the newsletter that was sent to you. One is a number of fraction bars and fraction equivalents. You can see if I move right here to 1/4, I also see that 2/8 and 3/12 are also equivalent. Let's move to 1/2. Look at all the different fractions that are equivalent. 7/14, 6/12, 5/10. So this is a great tool that you'll definitely want to explore. And you can also practice taking a fraction such as 10/14 and simplifying it and finding those common factors and then seeing if you come up with 5/7. Another site that I want to remind you about is the GCA Triumph Online account. I'm going to log in as a mock student, and just to show you what you have access to. When you log in, one of the things that has been assigned is an activity on equivalent fractions. So if you go right here to this lesson, and I am going to scroll over a little bit because I've reduced the screen size. So let's see if we can scroll over and see that. You will see where it says start. And then Under this tab, there's a lesson and there's also a practice tab. So when you open this equivalent fractions, you'll definitely want to explore both the lesson and practice tab. I know it's not quite opened yet, but when you scroll over, it will be right up here where it's lesson and practice, and you'll be able to go through those. So I'll come back to this in just a second to see if it opens up. The other thing that is in the newsletter is reference to Learn Zillion, and there's a link to go and watch a series of videos on equivalent fractions. Down the left hand side there is a series of all of these different videos that really model the math and fractions in a lot of conceptual ways. Also, don't forget about the math website that is referenced. When you go to the fraction page in 4th grade, there's videos that you can see. This week we've definitely focused on this standard for NF1, which is I can explain why fractions are equivalent using fraction models, and I can recognize and create equivalent fraction. Here's links to those Learn Zillion videos again, and all of these little pictures open up interactive activities that you can do online. So here's an example of one of those. As you can see right here, we have something that's divided into 15 parts, and we have 7 of those 15 highlighted. So if we want to create something that's equivalent, you could do that here in these circles. Sorry, let me go minimize that a second. You can go back to do that. You can also experiment with circles and create equivalent fractions. So right here, we want to make something that's equivalent to 2/4. So if I was doing that, I can see that 1/2 is definitely equivalent. So they went right there together. I could also move my slider and I could turn it into a different denominator. And let's highlight all of these. And again, they all line up the same. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 eighths is also equivalent to 2/4 and 1/2. So this is a great way to make equivalent fractions. So I hope you enjoy these activities. An additional thing that I wanted to share with you is with the document camera. You can always get a bag of Skittles or candy or M&Ms of some sort. I am going to attach this fractions with Skittles activity. And it says, what is the total number of Skittles? Right here we have 12. So of course we would write 12 right there. And then it says, out of the Skittles in your bag, how many of them are red? Well, 1 of the 12 are red. So we would write 1/12. This is a great way just to practice fractions in a fun way. If we look at our orange Skittles, we see that 4 of the 12 are red. So we can think of, is there other equivalent fractions we can write to show 4/12? I know that 1/3 is also equivalent to 4/12 because if I divide the numerator and the denominator by 4, I get 1/3. And remember, this represents 1. There's maybe other fractions that are equivalent. Then as you move down, there's a number line, so you can place the fractions on a number line. Since we have 12 Skittles, we'll want to make sure we have 12 increments. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know mine aren't exactly spaced correctly, so we have 6 on each side. And so we could place 4 of the 12 right here, which is also 1/3. So we can see the equivalence. And then next week we're going to start comparing fractions. So you could compare the number of yellow to red and compare those fractions to see what is more. So I hope you enjoy these activities. I'm going to head back to the PowerPoint so that we can go through and just talk about the big ideas from today's lesson. The one thing that we learned is that fractions are numbers. They're not a whole number, but they are a number. Fractions can be equivalent or represent the same amount. 1/4 is equal to 2/8 is equal to 4/16. They all represent the same amount, even though they may look a little different. A fraction with the same numerator and denominator represents one whole. So if we have a 3/3 or a 2/2, that represents 1. It is equivalent to 1. And fractions can be simplified and still represent the same amount. So here we have 2/4, and we divided by that 1/2 2 over 2 or 1 to get 1/2. We simplified that by finding the factors. Before you just mark this off your list of things to do, make sure you answer the ticket out the door without any help and attend next week's live classes, and definitely use the extra resources and daily calendar for additional support and review. We have tons of things at our school that are available to you, such as Learn Zillion, Study Island, Triumph Online, and the math website, so take advantage of those. And thank you for watching this recording, and we'll see you next week live in class.